Before this story begins, I want you to pause for just a second. Because sometimes, the most ordinary moments are the ones that quietly change everything. A look, a silence, a glance that lingers half a second too long. If you've ever felt truly seen by someone who was never supposed to understand you yet, this story is for you. And before we go any further, if stories that dig deep into real human emotion, quiet suspense, and moments that stay with you long after the video ends matter to you, subscribe to this channel now, because what you're about to hear isn't just a story, it's a mirror. Now, let me take you to a quiet kitchen in Vermont. Sarah Miller was standing alone in her kitchen on what should have been an entirely forgettable afternoon. Nothing dramatic, no storm outside, no raised voices, no warning signs. Just sunlight pouring through the narrow window above the sink, catching dust particles mid-air like tiny floating stars. The soft hum of the refrigerator, the faint clink of a spoon against a ceramic pot as she stirred a soup she wasn't even sure she was hungry for. It was the kind of day that slips past unnoticed, until it didn't. Sarah felt it before she understood it, a subtle shift, not in the room, but in the air itself. The kind of change you feel in your chest first, before your mind can catch up. She paused mid-stir, and that's when she saw him. Ethan stood in the doorway, her son, 17 years old, tall enough now that she had to tilt her head slightly to meet his eyes, a backpack slung over one shoulder, jacket wrinkled like he'd shrugged it on without thinking. But he wasn't moving. He wasn't rushing. He wasn't distracted. He wasn't half listening the way teenage boys usually are. He was just standing there, watching her. Not with the casual glance of a child waiting to be acknowledged, but with a steady, focused gaze that made Sarah's chest tighten in a way she couldn't immediately explain. It wasn't curiosity, it wasn't impatience, it was awareness. And suddenly Sarah felt exposed. Her fingers tightened around the spoon. Her body froze mid-step, because there was something different in his eyes, something deeper. It was as if, for the first time, Ethan wasn't looking at his mother. He was looking through her, seeing things she had never offered to show. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The silence stretched, thick and deliberate. Sarah noticed details she hadn't before. The way Ethan hesitated, like he wanted to say something but didn't trust the words yet. The way his jaw was set tighter than usual. The way his eyes didn't wander. He was holding something in. And somehow, she knew it wasn't about homework or dinner or anything small. Ethan was 17, but in that moment, Sarah saw him differently. The boy she used to tuck into bed had vanished somewhere along the way. In his place stood a young man who had learned things without being taught, who had watched quietly, who had noticed more than she ever realized. Her thoughts rushed back all at once. The years after Daniel died, the long nights, the silent grief, the way she learned to be strong because there was no one else left to be strong for him. She had raised Ethan alone, carried the weight without complaint, taught herself not to need acknowledgement. And now her son was looking at her like he knew, like he could see the exhaustion beneath her patience, the resilience beneath her calm, the woman beneath the role. Sarah swallowed hard. For the first time in years, she felt truly observed. Ethan shifted his weight slightly, but his eyes never left hers. That's when it hit her. This wasn't just a moment, it was a crossing, a line being stepped over quietly, from childhood into something else. She realized, with a strange mix of pride and ache, that she could no longer protect him from the world the way she once did. And maybe worse, she could no longer hide herself from him either. Her cheeks warmed, not with embarrassment, but with the intensity of being seen so clearly. She thought about all the small moments she'd dismissed over the years, the glances, the silences, the times she assumed he was too young to understand. She had been wrong. Ethan had been watching all along, learning who she was, not just as a mother, but as a person. The spoon slipped from her hand. It clinked softly against the counter. The sound echoed louder than it should have. Sarah stepped back slightly, heart racing, as if something fragile had just been exposed to the open air. And in that quiet kitchen, with sunlight warming the walls and her son standing in the doorway like a stranger, she somehow knew better than anyone else. Sarah felt the world shift. Not loudly, not violently, but permanently. Ethan finally moved. He walked past her, down the hall toward the living room, backpack still hanging from his shoulder. Sarah watched him go, the way he moved now, more deliberate, more grounded. Carrying the quiet weight of someone who was growing up faster than expected. He paused by the bookshelf, ran his fingers slowly along the spines of books he used to ignore. One of them was her favorite. Sarah's breath caught. Was he beginning to understand her? Not just the role she played, but the life she lived before him. And that question, that quiet realization, would change everything that followed. Ethan stood by the bookshelf longer than Sarah expected. Not reading, not pulling a book out, just standing there. His fingers traced the spines slowly, thoughtfully, as if each title carried a memory he hadn't lived, but somehow felt. Sarah leaned against the kitchen counter, her heartbeat louder than the ticking clock on the wall. The house felt smaller now, like the walls were quietly listening. He finally picked one book out. It was old, worn at the edges, her book. Sarah hadn't touched it in years. Ethan turned it over in his hands, studying the creased cover. When he spoke, his voice was calm, but there was something underneath it that made her chest tighten. "Did you really like this one?" he asked. "Not do you like it?" "Did." Past tense. Sarah hesitated. "Yes," she said softly. "I did." He nodded slowly, as if confirming something he already suspected. He sat down on the couch, the book resting on his knee, and for a moment he said nothing. He tugged absent-mindedly at the zipper of his jacket, a nervous habit from when he was younger. Then he looked up at her. Not quickly, not casually, deliberately. "Mom," he said, "what were you like before everything?" The question landed heavier than any accusation ever could. Sarah felt the air leave her lungs. Before everything, before widowhood, before survival mode, before being needed every second of every day, before Ethan became her entire world. She opened her mouth, then closed it again. No one had asked her that in years, not friends, not co-workers, not even herself. Ethan waited. He didn't rush her, didn't fill the silence. He had learned patience somewhere along the way. Sarah walked slowly into the living room and sat in the chair across from him. The afternoon light had shifted now, softer, warmer, stretching shadows across the floor. She folded her hands in her lap. She began, then stopped. She let out a quiet breath. "I was different." Ethan didn't smile, didn't react. He just listened. "I had plans," she continued. "Dreams. I wanted to travel. I wanted to write. I thought my life would look bigger." Her voice cracked slightly at the word bigger. Ethan's jaw tightened. She hadn't meant to say it like that. It wasn't regret, just truth. But once spoken, it felt like a confession she hadn't known she was carrying. "I loved your father," she added quickly, instinctively. "More than anything." "I know," Ethan said, not defensively, not sadly, just understanding. That was what broke her. Tears blurred her vision, surprising her with their suddenness. She blinked them back, embarrassed, but Ethan didn't look away. If anything, his gaze softened. "You don't have to stop being a person just because you're my mum," he said quietly. The words were gentle, but they struck like a bell. Sarah stared at him. "How do you know that?" she asked. He shrugged slightly. "I've watched you." That was all.